easiest way to draw the line between hands-on and cognitive is, do you need to physically be there? We are quite a long way from you going to a dental practice, sitting down in a chair, and a robot providing service to your mouth. There's the moment of care, and then there's everything that happens around it. Everything that happens around it is an operational problem. It's very easy to say, I sent the message at the right time. It's very hard to say, that patient got it, they read it, they understood it, they took the next step as a result. That next step is 90% of the battle in most hands-on healthcare settings. Can you get the patient to take the next step? It's not always clear what the next step is. 90% of your success, 90% of your growth will come from 10% of the things you try. 80-20 rule, 90-10 rule. And the question is, are you doing enough things to get to that 10%? Because what we often find clinic leaders will do is they'll make one or two changes and then they'll stop. And the reality is that those two changes are incremental. The receptionist's job, the frontline job, is not to answer the phone. It's to carefully scaffold, leading with empathy, the patient through a discovery process, and ultimately connect the dots for them to make a decision to move forward. That's where the inefficiency lies. That's where the leakage starts to surface. And you see each of these individual patient pathways, all of the edge cases that surface along the way, because healthcare, the whole thing is edge cases. Still in process is the most dangerous label for your new inquiry. What clinician wants to see 9 patients in a day, and then at the end of the day, sit down and make 45 phone calls, which most of them, by the way, don't even get answered? Nobody wants to do that.
So we previously discussed about two kinds of healthcare. Actually, healthcare is such a big word, but there was specifically a concept that's relevant was the difference between hands-on care versus cognitive care. That is more consult-led care. That's primarily about diagnosing, advising. Can you talk about these two kind of healthcare?
The easiest way to draw the line between hands-on and cognitive is, do you need to physically be there? If you're a patient and you have a problem or you're looking to get support from a practitioner, do you need to physically be on site in order to receive that care? So if you're going to see a dental practitioner, you need to be on site. It's very hard to have your teeth examined remotely. Not impossible, but very hard. If you have back pain, you go to a chiropractor. If you have to rehabilitate a knee, you have to go to a physiotherapist. If you have facial injectable, dermatology, these are things that often need to be done hands-on. You need to physically see someone, they often need to physically touch you. This is hands-on healthcare. And it's a very different kind of care to, we might use the word cognitive, remote, telehealth. These are all examples of care where you can talk therapy your way through a problem. You can receive a diagnosis based on conditions as described. There isn't a physical embodied element to providing that care. And it's a really important distinction because you become a service-based business. As soon as you cross that threshold, when you're providing a telehealth service, there's an element of service, but the experience is very contained. It's contained to a screen, it's contained to a window. You don't have to support a patient on a physical journey to your facility, in a waiting room, through the back door, into the treatment room. All of those steps compound to create an experience. That experience is very specific to hands-on healthcare, and you don't see that in therapy, in cognitive support, in parts of the care continuum that you can consume and deliver remotely.
So this is why there is a kind of, I guess this is related to the massive hype of AI doctors, that recently there's so many companies that's building AI doctors where it's not quite relevant to specifically the hands-on healthcare areas.
You do have the rise of the AI clinician, the AI doctor, AI medical expert, and that capability, that innovation, it might show up in parts of the hands-on healthcare journey, maybe in the pre-consultation, maybe in the consultation notes, maybe in the recommended treatment plan, but the actual embodied nature of hands-on healthcare means we are very far away from that experience not being delivered in a human-first manner. Doesn't mean that humans not going to be using new technology. They will. I went to a dentist recently and they had AI product sitting on top of their x-rays. The AI product was intending to surface cavities and issues that may not be immediately visible. So will AI enable hands-on healthcare practitioners? Absolutely. But will it replace the practitioner in the way that it might for a telehealth service or from a cognitive support service? Not yet. We are quite a long way from you going to a dental practice, sitting down in a chair, and a robot providing service to your mouth. We are quite a long way from that happening in physiotherapy and chiropractic and dermatology. It doesn't mean it will never happen, but it means that the obstacles, the challenges, the regulatory constraints on moving a robotic doctor from inception to market is significant. There's a huge battlefield of barriers between that idea and it being adopted in mainstream. And I'll give you a very simple example. I recently went to Neko Health, which is a sort of innovator and darling in the preventative healthcare space. It's a full body MOT. And they have technology coming out of every part of that clinic. You stand like you're in an airport security booth, and they take 2,000 pictures of your body in 5 seconds. And then they do your bloods, and they do your glaucoma test, and they test your circulation. And even in that experience, which is arguably a step into the future, there were still 2 practitioners with me for the entirety of the journey. There was a nurse who was doing my bloods, who was talking me through the experience. And then there was also a GP who came in to do specific checks. So even in a future version of care delivery, you can still see that there is a human layer, and it is going to be a very long time, not a forever possibility, but a very long time between where we are and the potential to go into a clinic and not have a hands-on component of that care experience. And so there's a huge difference there in terms of how the market will evolve. This idea that a telehealth service can be augmented and accelerated with AI, that's a today thing. That impacting hands-on care in the way that it does telehealth services or cognitive services is a bit different.
Is that why Coherent primarily focusing on building around the logistic aspect of healthcare rather than getting into, in terms of clinician, how to improve clinician decision or the entire sort of clinical side of things with the patients?
Yeah, so I think for us, when you think about receiving and providing care, there's the moment of care, and then there's everything that happens around it. Everything that happens around it is an operational problem. And when you look at something like a remote telehealth service or a remote consultation, the logistics of that are insignificant by comparison. Doesn't mean they don't exist, but it's very different because it shows up in the patient's life in a far less inconvenient manner. It does not disrupt the patient's normal behavior in the same way because they can wake up in the morning, have a remote consultation, and go back to their life. When you're talking about physically moving people needing to make conscious decisions to go from A to B, you're talking about time, you're talking about movement. These are logistics components. So operationally and logistically, the challenges of in-person care are considerably higher than they would be in many of these other sort of therapy or remote services. And so for us, when we look at where we can have the most impact, it's in the higher complexity operational parts of the journey. So where do you have this drop off because of how hard it is to get people to go and do things, to help people make that next step? And the number of times we hear from patients, I was just on holiday, oh, I forgot. You only have that correspondence because you are specifically focusing on patient response. And tracking back, working backward from patient response is a very different way to think about relationship building. It's very easy to say, I sent the message at the right time. It's very hard to say that patient got it, they read it, they understood it, they took the next step as a result. That next step is 90% of the battle in most hands-on healthcare settings. Can you get the patient to take the next step? It's not always clear what the next step is. Maybe it's to write a review. Maybe it's to come back for an appointment. Maybe it's to write back and say, hey, everything's fine, I'm feeling great. Maybe it's to book a consultation. Whatever that next step is, making sure that it happens or increasing the likelihood that it happens is a huge challenge. It's a very time-consuming, team-consuming, tech-consuming problem. And because of the patient journey, it is often nonlinear. It's not that you can say, 3 months after a patient starts care with me, this thing has to happen. Because sometimes that patient takes some time away, maybe it takes a bit longer. And so there's a huge amount of variability in the patient pathway. And you have to be able to move and operate around them in a way that you just can't when you have systems that are locking you into fixed processes based on time. And so we're really interested at Coherent in thinking about logistics as something that's dynamic. Logistics on a per patient basis, not a logistics based on a per provider basis. It's a very different frame on the problem.
Yeah, that makes sense. We also talked about in the past multi-site clinic groups and these owners or CEOs or senior operators, why they are acquiring clinics to build a clinic group, their motivations, what do they look for when they acquire, before they acquire, and what kind of stuff that they usually do after they acquire a clinic?
Yeah, I think the first thing that we're talking about is the mindset. So when I speak with the CEO of a healthcare group, maybe they're private equity based or from a commercial background, not necessarily a clinician, the conversation is totally different. I'm concerned about lifetime value of my patient body. I know I have drop off at these key moments. It's impacting my marketing spend. My cost per lead is going up. They're using language that communicates P&L mastery, profit and loss mastery, understanding why the value is not being captured in the business. Spoke recently with a new group, a few sites growing very quickly, and their communication wasn't, well, how much does it cost? And what if it's not successful? And instead it was, oh, you charge this. Well, if you help me increase appointments by X per month, then this is immediately ROI positive. And it took four seconds to have that conversation. And this is a group owner who we spoke on Monday, we spoke on Wednesday, we were onboarding by Friday. There's a pace, there's a speed that comes with commercial group leadership that does not happen at a practice level. We speak with entrepreneurial clinicians who have the motivation and the ambition to grow, but there's still a pace issue. There's a speed issue. There's a conversation around a clear problem. Yes, I am leaking patients across the journey. I know I need to solve that problem. Great, what's the next step? I need to talk to my team, and then weeks pass. The speed of implementation, the speed of adoption and change is much slower. So I think the mindset is very different when you're thinking about group executive leadership and clinic leadership. Doesn't mean that you can't move quickly as a clinic leader. It means that the mindset needs to change. You need to go from third gear to fifth gear. You need to be willing to accelerate into some of those things. Oftentimes the decisions there's a great growth guru who says 90% of your success, 90% of your growth will come from 10% of the things you try. 80-20 rule, 90-10 rule. And the question is, are you doing enough things to get to that 10%? Because what we often find clinic leaders will do is they'll make one or two changes and then they'll stop. And the reality is that those two changes are incremental. The big magic bullet is hiding somewhere in the third thing, the fourth thing, the fifth thing, the sixth thing. What are you doing as a clinic leader to make sure you're serially pursuing those things? So I think the biggest difference between the group and the clinic is the mindset. That's the sort of first thing. The second thing is that these group leaders they're not against providing high quality care. That is their business. They're in the business of providing high quality care, but they're also in the business of running a business. And so when they're looking at the way the clinic is performing, they're doing it in a very objective way. They're saying, if A, then B, or I did 10 of A and now I've done 10 of B. They're thinking about their operation as something that produces widgets. And that's a sort of dirty way of thinking about healthcare, but that is very much the reality. A patient comes in, they consume a certain service. What's the margin on that service? What's the retention on that service? It's great that you want to offer 25 different services, but actually those 5 services are very bad value. So we don't need to offer them. We can offer them something else. Imagine you're running an ice cream shop, nobody buys the vanilla. You stop selling vanilla. Many healthcare practices don't operate that way. They operate in the sense that I want to have all the ice cream here. I want to have every flavor available. But actually 5 of them don't move the needle. So why are you indexing to those 5? We spoke with a clinic owner, she's CEO at a two-site group, going quite quickly, opening a third site very soon. We've started working with them a couple months ago, and the diary is full to a point where when we do a call with her, she has to take it from outside the clinic. So there's literally no space to sit in the clinic. That's a huge change from where they were 2 months ago, 3 months ago. Have they fundamentally changed their business? No. Same service line, same marketing spend. What's changed? They've reinforced the front door and the back door. They've reinforced the way that leads are converted and managed. They've reinforced the way that legacy patients are recalled and retained. When you put bookends on the patient journey, the value starts to compound. you start to see density of appointments, density of revenue. The group owners, CEOs of multi-site groups, they are thinking about appointment density, revenue density, not new patient flow, but how do we capture and retain value inside of that journey? That is the biggest motivation for them, and it's what differs between clinic owner and group owner.
Would you say there's a fundamental difference of incentive structure between the two types, the clinic owner versus clinic group owner, or more the clinician clinic owner, I guess? And that incentive structure, or maybe there isn't one, but the difference would lead to different kind of challenges, different motivations.
I think easiest way to think about it is the food chain. So clinic owner is like a small fish, and it's trying to get big enough and attractive enough to be eaten by a slightly bigger fish. The bigger fish, which might be a small group or a very entrepreneurial clinician who's looking to establish a multi-site practice, that's the medium-sized fish coming along, starting to eat things. They want to accumulate a group of medium-sized fish so that a shark comes by and eat them. So at each stage, the incentive is actually very similar, to get big enough to be eaten. The bar for what that looks like changes at each stage. For the small fish, it's, can I hit ballpark $1 million, $1.5 million in turnover? Can I get to EBITDA 250 to 500 grand? And does my business run without me? So if I take a holiday for a month and a half, do we still have revenue and throughput, or is 80% of the patient book reliant on me? So as a single site owner operator, if the answer is yes-ish to those things, it's profitable, you're hitting a certain revenue target, and the business can run without you, then you are attractive. When you're at a group level, or even a small group level, you're saying, okay, I'm going to acquire 30 or 40 small site clinics, and then I'm going to sell that to a larger private equity group. That acquisition of 30 or 40 clinics, that leaning out, this becomes an exercise of science, not art. When you're going from 0 to 1 million as a practice, it's very much an exercise of art. Putting in place the systems, developing the brand, thinking about the patient relationship, building that initial credibility, that is the labor of love, the labor of passion. When you start to look at it from an acquisition perspective, it becomes a labor of science. It becomes a labor of efficiency and basically Excel cleaning up. Where can we cut out costs? Where can we improve top line? Can we capture margin a bit differently? Are we too heavy on certain parts of the clinic? Can we consolidate, bring certain things into head office? These are all questions that you're starting to ask at a group level that you don't ask at a clinic level. But the clinic owners who really see the difference, the clinic owners who build the £1.5 million practice, but rather than 250K in EBITDA, they are at 500K EBITDA. And so they're seeing 2x the value on exit. Those are the clinic leaders who are starting to think like group owners. They are looking at group owners and saying, hold on a minute, I need to think about systems here, here, and here. I need to think about labor efficiency here, here, and here. I need to think about how to improve my marketing spend, focusing on qualified leads, not lead volume here, here, and here. And as you get this transition from I'm building a small business to I'm building an acquisition target, you will see the value. I mean, imagine building a clinic, you build it over the course of 5, 6, 7 years, it hits $1.5 million in turnover. You can either see 5x multiple, or you can see 5x multiple on 250K, 5x multiple on 500K. You can work the same 5, 6 years, build the same revenue, the same footprint, and still come away with 2 times the value. It's like you built 2 clinics by comparison to the clinic across the street, which has only hit half in profitability because the cost stack isn't right and the revenue stack is not right. So the clinic leaders who are really seeing the difference are those that are trying to act scientifically, not artistically. They don't necessarily need to lose the thing that makes them special, but they need to start thinking about efficiency in a different way. There's a huge difference in those 2 mindsets.
That's almost like we discussed about the hierarchy of clinic operations, right? This is almost like the hierarchy, or maybe more accurate word would be life cycle or stages, different stages or progression of a clinic owner, starting from a small fish to managing a small clinic all the way. And then at every stage, they will be thinking or focusing on very different things, right?
100%. It's interesting. There's a group here in the UK. It's a dental group. They've got, I think, 19 sites. And they are very operationally lean. They offshore quite a lot of their work. They've got, I think, a team in South Africa, a team in maybe India as well, handling different part of the operational stack. So they're thinking from very early stage. It's founded by a, I think, commercial operator, not necessarily a clinician, but they founded from an earlier stage with the idea that they were going to try and build efficiency into their business from day one. The thing that's really interesting is that the efficiency that they're capturing is labor market arbitrage. They're saying, okay, I can run my business on lower wages with people in different parts of the world. And so that's one way they're creating efficiency. But where a lot of providers fall short is technology as a way to create efficiency and leverage. A lot of practitioners will think, okay, let me offshore, let me think about a remote front office. They will look at labor and wages as the leverage in their clinic. The reality is that they should be thinking about technology as the way to create leverage. But technology adoption and implementation in healthcare is hard because you don't have users in the clinic to make the systems work. And so you end up adopting these tools and then only using 10% of their capabilities. So if you're going to think about technology as leverage, you need a technology partner who's going to take something all the way through to success, not just hand you the buttons and say, good luck, call us if you have any problems. And so this group that I'm thinking about, they've done an incredible job of creating leverage through labor, but very few providers are creating leverage through technology. And that's where that next inflection point happens. That's where you can step up because you can start seeing 30%, 40% reduction in labor hours. Now you're in a totally different game.
Speaking of technology, Salesforce, actually you had a conversation with someone who was looking to adopt technology to improve their operations, right? But apparently it was a nightmare situation. Tell me about that story.
I do not speak from a position of authority of bashing Salesforce, which is an amazing business. They do whatever, $40 billion a year in annualized revenue. Obviously, they know what they're doing. But just because they know what they're doing doesn't mean you know what you're doing with their tool. These are very different things. Salesforce is an enterprise solution. What I mean by enterprise solution is it's its own language. You need a team. You need people who are there are people who specialize in Salesforce implementation. There are agencies that specialize in Salesforce implementation. There are people who spend 5, 6, 7 years training on how to be Salesforce power users. So I'm speaking with a commercial director at a small scale private hospital. They recently implemented Salesforce. They went on a year-long implementation. It has been an absolute disaster. That's not in any way a reflection of the technology. I'm sure the technology is very good. It wouldn't be the business that it is if the technology were very good. Doesn't mean it's good for you. The technology can be good and it cannot be good for you. As a healthcare provider, you need to be able to drive your own car. If you're going to go out and buy software, every time we speak to this clinic, we hear from someone in the clinic, the system is too hard to use, we don't know why it's not working, and now they're locked in. Toast. That's it. There's no flexibility. They have now recommitted to this platform, which is costing them tens of thousands of dollars a month. Nobody in the clinic is confident with what they're able to achieve with that tool. And so I think this is one of the transitions that's happening right now from a technology perspective. People are no longer selling the hammer. They're selling the outcome of hammering something in, or they should be selling the outcome of hammering something in. So when you go out and you buy a tool like Salesforce Health Cloud and you implement it incorrectly, and you don't have the team in-house to use it, you basically just went out and bought a huge hammer. Doesn't mean you've got your wall. Doesn't mean you've got your things nailed in. And so we're hearing the frustration from clinic owners. On the other side of the spectrum, we work with a clinic that uses ActiveCampaign's a great software. It's not the right software for a healthcare environment. So you have this other, the enterprise software, you've got the SME software. The reality is that those tools are not built for your clinic reality today. And the team that you have on site are not specialists at using those tools, like giving someone a race car who's only ever ridden a bicycle and saying, here you go, get from A to B. I don't know how to drive a race car. I've never handled a high-performance sports car before.
Are you suggesting they should hire the right driver for the right car?
I think the right driver doesn't exist. The right driver doesn't exist.
Why is that?
You have to think about, so you're a small-scale private hospital, as an example, right? You've got a headcount of, on the admin and business side, of 40 people, excluding your practitioners, your therapists, your surgeons, whatever it is. You've got 40 people there. You start drawing that org chart. Where does your Salesforce team sit? You're gonna go out and hire 5 people just to run that tool. So now you're spending 20 grand on the tech stack, and you're spending 5x human salaries just to run the thing. That's an incredible cost base. You can't carry that cost as a healthcare provider. This is the invisible ceiling. You've got invisible patient leakage, but there's also an invisible ceiling. The invisible ceiling is you are you are not leveraging technology to create efficiency in the business. So you're trying to piece things together, and then when they don't really work, you just throw bodies at it. That's where it starts to break down. I mean, we see this in many of the clinics that we work with right now. They go out and they buy an AI receptionist. We're speaking with a 3-site physio group right now. They're implementing an AI receptionist. We started speaking to them at the start of that implementation. This is almost a month ago. And they said, listen, we're really interested in what you guys do, but we need a few weeks because we're going through this implementation. We said, yeah, no problem. Let's reconnect at the end of the month. We dropped them a note at the end of the month. Hey, how's it going? It's been a disaster. This isn't working. That isn't working. My team doesn't know how to use it.
What exactly didn't work? I'm curious.
So I think the first thing is a lot of the AI reception products, not bashing AI receptionists, but a lot of the AI receptionist products, they make the case that now we can answer every phone call. Maybe. So let's say that's true. Let's say you can answer every phone call. Every phone call doesn't have a straight through pathway, right? And not every patient calls in and says, hi, I'm so-and-so and I want to book at so-and-so time and can you take payment from me? Okay, great. So do you handle that issue end to end? Absolutely. But many of these products, what if a patient asks a question that the agent doesn't know the response to because it's not in the SOP? Now there's a to-do, there's a task. Who needs to do the task? The receptionist, human receptionist. So now the AI receptionist was able to have that first phone call, surface the issue, assign a task to the person still has to do the job. So it's not like you replace that person. That person is still there. Have you made their life a little bit easier? Maybe at the edges. You've taken away some of the noise, but the stuff that really takes time still falls on their plate.
It sounds more like an inquiry form capture, right? So essentially.
10 years ago, we lived through the generation of web bots, chat bots on a website. This is a much better version of that, and it's on the phone lines. That's good. But the reality is, and we see this in the work that we do, when you're talking about, as an example, high-value surgical consultation, the receptionist job, the frontline job, is not to answer the phone. It's to carefully scaffold, leading with empathy, the patient through a discovery process, and ultimately connect the dots for them to make a decision to move forward. Now, if the patient doesn't feel it's right for them, that's fine. It's not a pushing job. Being a sales desk in a healthcare environment is not about pushing people to make a decision. It's about enabling them. But I'll give you a very simple example. We spoke with a patient recently who asked for a surgical consultation on a Friday with a specific surgeon in the hospital. Turns out that surgeon doesn't work on Fridays. Full stop. So one way to handle that is for the response to be, sorry, Fridays are never available. That's the SOP. The SOP says this person will work on Friday. But actually, if you have the conversation, hey, we have a patient and they're really interested in this. By the way, they're looking at this surgery and turns out that the practitioner is happy to be available on Friday. But you only come to discover that by doing the work. That's where the inefficiency lies. That's where the leakage starts to surface. And you see each of these individual patient pathways, all of the edge cases that surfaced along the way, because healthcare, the whole thing is edge case. The entirety of the healthcare spectrum is edge cases. It's a question of which edge case. And so when we're thinking about creating, helping practice create leverage, it's about treating the edge cases as normal cases. I'll give you a different example. We work with a dental clinic. We started doing patient recall for them. About 3 months in, we had a second conversation. We said, listen, you've got a large base of archived patients. These are patients who haven't been in for 5-6 years. We don't know why they're archived. Do you know why they're archived? Oh no, we're not really sure either. Okay, so you don't know why they're archived. We don't know why they're archived. Maybe we should reach out and find out. 5,000 patients. So we start reaching out to these 5,000 patients. Suddenly people are activating. Oh yeah, I haven't been in for a while. I want to come back. Who told you to archive these patients? Who made that decision? Where in the business life cycle did someone sit down and say, these people shouldn't be contacted? I'll tell you where. Somebody in the clinic that was hired at some point in time clicked the wrong button. They clicked the wrong button. Leakage. You're losing value because somebody clicked the wrong button. You're a clinic owner. You don't know who's clicking what buttons. They're in your practice management software, stuff's happening. You don't know what's happening. You don't have that oversight. So you got 5,000 patients that you initially spent money on to go out and acquire as a new customer. Someone archived them. Why? What was the basis for that decision?
Maybe just misjudgment, right? Like,
may very well be misjudgment.
They set a arbitrary rule. Any patient that hasn't been, like 5 years ago, any patient hasn't been in for 1 year,
archive them,
are gone. And now 6 years down the line.
Exactly. And you've got 5,000 patients sitting back there. We have another clinic that has a sales process that has, on the first day of inquiry, 2 phone calls. The second day, email. Third day, another phone call. Fourth day, another phone call. Fifth day, another email, something like that. So phone call, email for basically 48 to 72 hours. We started working with them. We said, well, it's interesting. Okay, phone call, email. What about SMS, WhatsApp? So there was a capability limit for them. But the other question that we kept asking ourselves is, who told you that this was the right sequence? Who told you that I'm not saying it isn't the right sequence, but who told you, where in your journey did you discover that 2 phone calls and email, another phone call, email is the right thing to do?
Just a decision.
Just a decision. Because they were setting up the shop, they were setting up the tool, they had to pick something. They said, this seems like a good idea. This is what they've been doing for 3 years. We don't know if it's good or bad. They don't know if it's good or bad. They just made a decision, set it and forget it, out of mind. In reality, a huge number of people who move through that lead process don't like to answer the phone, don't answer their emails. So now we have 97 patients in the last few weeks, 97 who previously made it to the end of the journey with no engagement, who are now activating on SMS and email. SMS and WhatsApp. Why was that decision made? Not that because people are intentionally making the wrong decision. They don't know what the right decision is. There's no data. There's no visibility to say, oh yes, when a patient asks this happens, that happens. There's no data. The data.
That was the invisibility aspect, right? And also like I would imagine most clinic owners, they do think that they do follow up and it's just a business as usual thing that they do. They've already been doing since the beginning of time.
We have a clinic owner we spoke to recently, a smaller clinic. They do about 350K in turnover. Very entrepreneurial clinician who leads it. And we're talking to him about how are leads handled. And we know we have a lot of pattern recognition in this space. And we know that when we ask a clinic owner, how are leads handled? Tell us about your lead handling process. The ones who have a process in place are the ones who answer that question with numbers. This is what a good answer sounds like. A good answer sounds like, we get 146 inquiries on average per month. Of those 146 inquiries, 74 of them progress to consultation. Of those 74, 33 move on to treatment plan. The people that drop off in the first stage drop off because of price or because of location. As soon as a clinician answers, if they answer that way, we know, okay, this person is operating at a level of depth that is genuinely efficient. Now, could it improve? Could it be better? Yeah, of course it could be better. It can always be better. But the baseline there is really established. We have that conversation 1 in 50. The conversation we have with this clinic owner that I'm thinking about said, tell us about your lead handling process. We're really on top of it. That's the answer. We're really on top of it. How do you know? Every day I walk in, I tell my front of house, how many people called in yesterday? What are we doing to follow up with them? And they tell me they're on top of it. I know we're on it. Okay, if you say so. Yeah, that's fine.
They are, in fact, on top of it, but it's just that they don't know.
Can't see it.
Better that there are.
They can't see it.
That's why it's invisible.
It's invisible.
Market, right?
Exactly.
Because of all the reasons that you outlined in the past. And because of the complexity of healthcare, hands-on healthcare
100%.
operation, to a typical clinic owner, it's not actually a leakage because these patients supposed to be gone, right? So not supposed to come back because of XYZ reason, but because of the clinic or patient recovery work that Coherent does, Coherent's team and tech does, you realize that a large proportion of them can be brought back or shouldn't even go off track in the first place.
It's interesting. We talked about invisible leakage. I can't see it, so I don't know that it's there. One of the biggest points of invisible leakage is CPC, not cost per click, cost per consultation. A huge misconception in the industry is that you should be indexed to cost per lead. So a lot of clinic owners we talk about, what's my cost per lead, cost per qualified lead? It doesn't matter. It's a very controversial thing to say. It doesn't matter. The thing that matters is your cost per consultation, because you have massive leakage between qualified lead and consultation. And that's the leakage you don't see. You should be tracking cost per consultation. When you track cost per consultation, it will be a very scary number. Don't track cost per lead. Cost per lead, you say, oh, I'm cost per lead 46 pounds. No problem. Cost per consultation, 436 pounds.
Why is that?
People who reach out as qualified lead drop between lead and consultation. You lose them.
Because of the action from the clinic side.
Correct. There is no process, technology in place to allow you to systematically and programmatically progress leads from inquiry to consultation. In between consultation and inquiry, you may very well have a factor of 10x on leakage. I'll give you an example. We recently did a 3-week review with a clinic up in Edinburgh, a great clinic, roughly 100 inquiries in a month. In the course of those 4 weeks, of those 100 inquiries, by the way, they're not doing any marketing, zero marketing right now. It's all organic inbound. So this is high intent that's coming to the front door, not people who are seeing £100 off ads and clicking a button. This is high intent traffic. You don't reach out to a clinic organically unless you're really thinking about something. It's not like I want to consider my holiday options. This is a high intent approach. So of their, I think it was actually 98, but of their 100 inquiries in that month, roughly 30%, so call it 30, 32, 33, converted to an initial consultation. That's a third. That's not marketing spend. That's high intent traffic. A few people were marked as lost because they were asking about services that weren't on offer at the clinic. And they have about 60 patients, 60 ballpark, 60%, 60 patients who are still in process. Still in process is the most dangerous label for your new inquiry. Still in process is where your profitability goes to die from a lead perspective. Still in process is the nightmare that you want to end. There are 2 statuses for your lead inquiries: closed won and closed lost. Still in process is a catch-all for we didn't do the hard work, we didn't follow it up, we didn't chase, we didn't engage, we didn't do it in the right way at the right time. Still in process is the worst way to track cost per lead. Track cost per consultation, you will see the pain of still in process. Cost per consultation will tell you not, am I getting traffic? Am I getting revenue? These are very different questions. So what you should be dividing on a month-to-month basis is not total lead inquiries by marketing spend on average. That will give you a blended cost per lead. Wrong number. Look at cost per consultation. How many consultations? How many new consultations? What's your marketing spend? That number will terrify you.
But also, if they don't know better, if they've never experienced leakage being plugged, they would potentially just accept the number being high, right? Oh, this is actually 100%. How much it will cost to bring in the conversion of consultation. But in fact, for a well-run clinic with the right tech and team support that plug that hole, plug that leakage, the number will be night and day.
100%. Night and day. I mean, we're talking about, we work with a clinic, and it's not all clinics, by the way. We'll pat ourselves on the back. It's not all clinics. Working with a clinic who in their first month working with us said it was their best month ever. The clinic's been around for more than 5 years. Best month ever in 1 month. Not because we show up and do magic, because we've plugged the gap. You've got loss, you're bleeding out. There's that really terrifying GIF animation of a robot scooping up its own blood and then leaking it out again. It's harrowing. I mean, it will absolutely terrify. It's stuff of nightmares. That's what a lot of clinics are doing. They're bleeding out and then they're trying to scoop up their own. There's nothing protecting the core. And so the way you go from treading water, incremental improvement, to, hold on, business is fundamentally different today than it was last month, is by addressing the leakage. That is the fundamental value loss. It hits all parts of the organization: administrative inefficiency, marketing spend inefficiency, clinic utilization, clinician happiness, which is something that every group owner should be thinking about. How do I retain my clinical staff? Very hard to recruit, very hard to train, very hard to retain. How do you retain your staff? Make sure that follow-up isn't their job.
Because it's very administrative, right?
What clinician wants to see 9 patients in a day, and then at the end of the day, sit down and make 45 phone calls, which most of them, by the way, don't even get answered? Nobody wants to do that. You want to increase clinic and clinician satisfaction from a practitioner perspective. Let them show up, treat people, and go home. Hands-on healthcare is a physically demanding job. You have to be on, physically present. To be a chef, you're on your feet all day. You're hands-on all day. You don't want to sit down and do administrative follow-up. You don't.
I had a question just on the topic that you were talking about. When a clinic group CEO acquiring a clinic, or basically buy, sell, exit sort of dynamic, especially, well, most clinics that get to a good sort of financial or commercial state by delivering excellent clinical service, and then the clinician or the principal clinician became well known, they built their brand, right? Individual clinician brand that made the clinic successful. But out of curiosity, when a group looking out to buy a clinic like that, how do they value of course, business is good, profit is good, but the brand is established based on the clinician's name, right? Attached to that personal brand. It's not really going to be in the situation where you take the clinician out of the equation and the business is going to be operating the same as in the past. What's your view on that? What's your experience in that?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to think about it is imagine you're playing a sports match. Imagine you're playing football, or you're running a relay race. You're running a relay race and you're passing a baton from team member to team member. The clinician, the principal, is the person who is instrumental to every handoff, right? If you're in a relay race, every time the baton is passed, the clinician is involved. Conversion of inquiry through to patient, retention of the patient. But every time there's a moment of change, the clinician principal is in some way involved. This reliance is hugely problematic because everything flows through the central nervous system. There's no autonomy, agency, capability that isn't hanging on the business owner. It's extremely hard, culturally, more than anything. It's very, very hard to change that, even post-acquisition, because what happens is if that clinician steps away, the entire team, everyone's moving in flow. They all know how each other work. Everything moves in a certain way. As soon as you pull the linchpin out, everything starts to crumble. So now you've got this post-acquisition recovery that has to happen. It's often why there's a 12-month lock-in, right? If you're a principal practitioner, you sell your practice, you need to stay there for 12 months because they're going to need to think about that continuity and transition. The way you facilitate and improve that transition, make yourself more attractive target is not only by reducing dependency on you in terms of the appointment book, but it's also by creating systems of work in different parts of the clinic, using technology, using team, using suppliers that mean, hey, if you step away, life moves on. And the easiest, I spoke with a clinic owner who advocates for this quite a lot. He says the best thing you can do as a clinic owner is take a holiday. Just take a holiday. Take more holiday. Go away. He goes away 3 or 4 times a year for a couple weeks at a time. Disappears. Basically not contactable unless there's an emergency. He comes back, that clinic's still running. Is there a bit of a revenue drop? Sure, because he stepped away and he makes up 10, 15, 20% of the book. But clinic's still running. People have a job to do. They know what to do. Taking a holiday, critical. If you can't do that, there's a problem. You haven't built a team that are capacitated with the right tools, the right know-how to actually go the distance. And this is the jump, 1 site to 2 sites, because you cannot physically be in 2 places. So is the playbook that you've built in Clinic 1, is it replicable? Can it be copy and pasted over to Clinic 2, or does it rely entirely on your presence, your brand, your name? Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just a different business. It's a different business model to be a headline celebrity clinician entrepreneur where everything is about you and you are the brand, as opposed to building a system of work where you happen to be the wrapper, the icing on the cake, but the foundations are extremely robust. Very, very different.